Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Ojit Kumar Oza, Madhav Chaudhary College, Borpeta. Respected Chairperson, the topic of my paper is an anthropological discussion on tribal rights and movements in India. Tribal are called as the indigenous or native inhabitants of Indian subcontinent. They have occupied a major part of the Indian population. According to the National Census Report 2011, the scheduled tribe constitute 8.6% of the country's total population. The tribes in India was a self-contained, homogeneous group that existed independently of any hierarchical system. They had a great love and respect for freedom and self-identity. They are facing different challenges to carry on their own distinctive style of life in different times. These challenges in tribal people were mainly came into two waves, in colonial period and in post-colonial period. The tribal movements against the identity crisis and protection to territory have been prevalent in India since the days of the colonial rule. Though several constitutional safeguards and protection measures have been provided for the tribal people of the India, the tribal movements are still exist in different issues. There are different socio-economic causes behind the tribal unrest. The present paper has aimed to discuss the tribal rights and movements in India in anthropological contents. Methods and materials. The data of this work were collected from the different book, research papers and articles available in the website. All data were collected from the secondary sources. Research papers and articles were carefully examined to write this paper. The tribal movements against the identity crisis and protection to territory were started in India since the colonial period. Tribes are the autochthonous population of India. The ancestors of the tribes in India are Vedic or pre-Vedic antiquity. They have definite independent territory and culture. In colonial period, most of the tribal territories in present-day India were captured and ruled by the colonial administrator. The colonial administrator were tried to convert their religious and culture into Christianity. They were also started a novel economic system which includes commercialization of the land and forest, occupational structure, well-defined property right, marketing of the agricultural surplus, etc. The ultimate objective of conversion, the religion and culture of tribal people into Christianity and implementation of this economic system was to exploit the socio-economic resources of India for the wealth of the British Empire. The tribal and non-tribal peoples of India were lost their rights on the land and property. They were started movements against the colonial administrator to restore rights on land, property, territory and traditional principality. The tribal movements and peasants movements in India were one side by side during the colonial period. In the last two centuries, 70 tribal movements were seen in India. At the earliest stage, these tribal movements were rudimentary and under-organized. These were sporadic movements. These movements were considered as the unimportant and marginal. After some decades, these movements gained enough potentiality to trade and administrators. In colonial period, the causes of the tribal movements can be categorized into 5 categories: that land alienation, exploitative revenue system, forest policies, the introduction of intermediaries, and cultural suppression. At that time, during the colonial periods, the colonial rulers were given some constitutional right to the tribal population. 19th century tribal movements in India became a serious problem to the colonial ruler. The colonial ruler were adopted different executive and legislative measures to the handle and problem. In the first phase, they tried to tackle those rebellious tribes with arms which were considered as dangerous before. Leaders of the rebellious tribes were bribed by giving money allowances. The administrators were encouraged some military officials to settle down around the tribal habitation. In 1782, August Cleveland, the administrator of the Rajmahal Hills, suggested to withdraw some particular area of tribal habitation from normal administration. Subsequently, the local court, comprising of local tribal leaders, got power to supervise the civil and penal jurisdictions over the hill tract. In this administrative reforms, the Malpaharias was the first tribal group who got right to enjoy rent-free land directly from the government. With the reference of the Malpaharias, a hill assembly was formed for conducting the affairs of the tribe. This assembly was guided by Cleveland and his followers. The assembly was supposed to maintain its own procedure. In 1796, a universal regulations for the tribes was granted by the government. This regulation was known as the Regulation I. Indian Council Act 1861 was formulated for the special administration to the affected tribal areas. In 1870, the British Parliament gave the power to Governor General in Council to legalize the regulation. In the next phase, a special type of administration was introduced for the tribal areas. In this phase, the government was made some special provision for the tribal communities. Consequently, in 1874, British Act was formulated, which was known as the Scheduled District Act. The aims of this act was to saving life of Aboriginal people from critical exploitation by reserving some special areas. The Government of India Act 1990 under Section 52A/2 was passed, which empowered the Governor General in Council to declare any territory as a backward tract after obtaining the sanction of the Secretary of the State. In 1935, some other act of Government of India was passed after the recommendation of Simon Commission 1929, which made more stringent provisions for the special treatment of the tribal areas. In post-colonial period, the causes of the tribal movement in India may be classified are as follows: movements due to exploitation by outsider, movements due to economic deprivation, movements due to separatist tendencies, movements seeking political autonomy and formation of state aggregation, movements, forest-based movements, and socio-religious or socio-cultural movements. In the post-colonial period, the government of India given some constitutional rights to the tribes of India. It may be categorized into 7 groups. One is educational cultural safeguards, number 2 social safeguard, number 3 economic safeguard, number 4 political safeguard, number 5 service safeguards, number 6 fifth schedule of the Constitution, and the 6th schedule of the Constitution. In anthropological concept, tribes are those peoples who have kinship ties, common territory, one language, joint ownership, one political organization, etc. Each tribe has a traditional identity in terms of territory. The members of each tribe refer each territory as their home. They have a common and distinct name, and all the members share an in-group sentiment. Anthropologists believe that tribal coming in contact with the advanced culture have got modern outlook development. In this context, the civilized world can act as a sense agent. Anthropologists also advocate for an ultimate integration of the tribes into the mainstream of the Indian life. In order to build up a prosperous nation, anthropologists want to develop the tribal communities without hampering their original style of life. In anthropological concept, before prescribing a solution, government should reach out the problems specified to each tribe. Anthropologists do not believe on the process of the making a blanket like general policy which could be applicable to